see everybody. How you doing? Good. Thank you, Michael and worship teams, for the well thought out worship. That was really good. What's that? Well, we do. Did you know that? That's how good this sermon's going to be. Just like, you're going to just be wanting to give it, right? I'm not sure where that came from. Is it all my original?
Yes. I thought you put it on there for a reason.
What's that?
I figured you put it on there for a reason.
Yeah. I thought Paul thought I was being sarcastic about the worship. Like, I'm being sincere here. I'm not. So, anyway, can you?
Yep.
Will it go away if you click on it? I don't know. Hey! No longer take American Express. I mean, these are MasterCard. Anyhow, well, that's a good start to this day. All right, so we're going to be talking about Mephibosheth today. Mephibosheth, and it's such an interesting story that we're going to take it in two parts. We're going to do it this week, and then I'm going on vacation. Our family's leaving for vacation as soon as church is over today. So, depending on how excited I am to go, will depend on the length of the sermon here. It might be really short. But we are going to Disneyland, so it might be really long. I don't know. Anyhow, so we will be driving straight to LA as soon as we're done here. And so, I'm looking forward to that. All right. So anyway. But David and Mephibosheth here. I titled this, A Dead Dog at the King's Table. And the truth is, this is an amazing story about grace. Amazing story about grace. And it's our story. It's our story. Let's have a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I just ask that you would help us today, Lord. God, thank you for this place. Thank you for just it is just awesome to be here. It's fun to be here. It's good to be here. It's a neat thing you're doing here. And God, help us not to take it for granted. Lord, thank you for every single person you brought here. God, thank you for just what we've heard and seen already. And we just ask that you would just speak to us right where we're at, where we need you, and we recognize that. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Oh, hey, there we go. This gets better and better. I wanted to say hi to, or recognize that Dan Roth is here. Dan Roth is one of our missionaries to Latvia. Yeah. You guys in the building clinic? Yes? Nice. And we sent a team there, and he was there. And I have never been closer to Russia than I have ever been with anyone else but this guy. We actually went to Ludza. Is that there? A town called Ludza, which is about 7-8 kilometers from the Russian border, and that's as close as I got. And interestingly enough, we ate at a little cafe there, and I think it was in a hotel, I'm not sure, but the wallpaper was the Declaration of Independence. I don't know if you remember that or not. So we were about 7 kilometers from Russia, and the wallpaper in the restaurant we had at was, yeah, I already told you that part. But anyhow, it was crazy. It was wild to just look up and see that. So I don't know if they were hinting around or they were just saying, I don't know, but that was really cool. And so that was really good. So thanks for driving me all over the place, and thanks for your hospitality. It was great to see you. So David and Mephibosheth, they're a dead dog at the king's table. The first thing we see here is the fulfillment of a promise. If you remember back when we were talking about Saul chasing David down, and David being in the cave and all of that, remember Saul said when he kind of came to his senses, please take care of my family. Please take care of my family. Whatever you do, I know you're the king, you're going to be the king, please take care of my family. And what did David say? I'll do it. Now, did he owe Saul's family that? I don't think so. I mean, Saul tried to hunt him down like a dog, and they started this big war, and he was always chasing him and made him miserable. And Jonathan, Saul's son, was David's best friend, and because of Saul's actions, they both ended up dead. And David finally ends up king, and that's where we're at right now. David is king. Saul's dead, Jonathan's dead, and here's David still thinking about that promise that he made to Saul and what he does. David asks, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" So he's going to fulfill this promise he made to Saul, but the way he describes it is he's doing it for his best friend's sake. How many of you guys have a best friend? Anybody here have a best friend? I have a best friend. I don't have any brothers and sisters. I have a half-brother, but I didn't grow up with brothers and sisters. And I have a best friend. His name's Paul. He lives up in Bremerton, Washington. We grew up together, and we talk I guarantee we'll talk today. I guarantee we'll text. We'll communicate today. We have this on Thursday night is Joy and my date night. Every Thursday night we try, and sometimes we have to shift it around, but every Thursday night Joy and I try to go out on a date. She's good looking. I gotta keep her happy. I'm just kidding. Well, I'm not kidding about good looking. I'm kidding about anyway, you're gorgeous, honey, wherever you are. But we go out all the time. It's been great. We enjoy that. But inevitably, every time we're out on a date, Paul either call or text me. And so his wife calls me his girlfriend, and Joy calls him my girlfriend, and it's probably not too far from the truth. But anyway, we're best friends, and I can't imagine life without him. I can't imagine life without him. I mean, every time something happens, I text him or call him. Every time he has something happen, he texts or calls me. And it's daily. If we go a few days, it's unusual because we're best friends. And that's how David and Jonathan were. And Jonathan died because of Saul's arrogance, basically. And David says, "You know what? I'm going to show that kindness, but I'm doing it for Jonathan's sake." And we all, if you have a best friend, you know you do just about anything for them. I do anything for Paul's family. He do anything for my family. And that's what David's doing here. Do it for Jonathan's sake. Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" Now you can imagine Saul's servant, or his steward, coming before King David. Probably be pretty scary, wouldn't it? I would think. Back then, it didn't take a whole lot for them to just off with your head type of thing, you know? It didn't take a whole lot back then for them to just get mad at you and just on a whim say, "You know what, I want rid of these guys." Right? So Ziba comes in, and I'm guessing this was sort of a face-down, bowing type of "at your service." You know? When David called him in, and he said, "At your service," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" And if you remember, David was struck with the kindness that God had shown him throughout his trials. And now he's responding by wanting to show that kindness back. You know, it's amazing. When we allow ourselves to see God's grace working, it causes us to want to show that grace to others. You know, when we allow, it's there. God's grace is there, whether we're allowing ourselves to see it or not. Because sometimes we'll find the one little thing that's going wrong in our lives, and we'll focus on that. Or maybe it's a big thing, but we'll focus on that. But we're not seeing God's grace. We're not allowing ourselves to see it. But when we do allow ourselves to see it, because it is there, and it is there in amazing ways, it causes us to reciprocate that and to go and want to show that to others. And so David says, "I want to show God's kindness to somebody else. Is there anybody else still alive from Saul's house?" Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He's lame." You could say but he is lame in both feet. Now back then, if you had anything wrong with you, you were a social pariah. You were a social pariah. We are living in an unusual time in America, which is in the world really, which is a good time because we're taking away a lot of those stigmas off of people. When you're not quite, when something's physically wrong or something's mentally wrong, we're taking the stigmas off, and we're making things accessible. We're making things. It's an unusual time though. For years and years and years throughout history, if you were different, man, you had a hard time. It's still not completely right, but it's much better. But back then, all the way back thousands of years ago, if you had something wrong with you, you were so limited and so basically worthless to society because of the way they looked at you. There's no way a king's going to take a look at you. and want to do anything with you, except maybe get rid of you because you're related to the wrong person. And so he said, Ziba answered the king, there is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet. Now, here's how he became lame. Saul's armies and David's armies were warring, and Saul's commander, Abner, got killed, got murdered, and it threw Saul into a tizzy, and he took off and started retreating, and everybody was fleeing out of the house of Saul, and here's what happened. And this is exactly how it is in Scripture. It's just in parentheses here. Jonathan's, is that parentheses? What is that? Yeah, that's parentheses. Not quotation marks. I knew that. I'm smarter than I thought. All right, so anyway, this is actually how it is. Aren't you glad you hired me? Anyhow, Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in both feet. He was 5 years old when the news, now this is 2 Samuel chapter 4, a few chapters back. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled, but as she hurried to leave, he fell and became disabled. His name was Mephibosheth. So it was an accident. He was being carried by his nurse. She picked him up and fled, but as she hurried to leave, he fell. She dropped him or something happened, and he broke something. Something became bad, and both his feet didn't work anymore. He became lame in his feet. And that's how he became lame. So that's his story. Now, the man from no thing. I didn't spell that wrong. That's on purpose. The man from no thing. Now, back to 2 Samuel chapter 9. So the king says, where is he? Ziba answered, he is at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel, in Lodabar. So the king had him brought from Lodabar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. Now this place Lodabar is interesting. It actually, it means one of two things. It means no pasture. And the Hebrew can be kind of difficult. It can mean no pasture, or it could mean no thing. So literally, this guy is from a place that has nothing. It's known for what it doesn't have. It was just, from what they say, no one knows where it really is exactly, but from its description, it's all negative. It's all negative. Where he lived he was from nowhere. He was from nothing. He was lame man from nowhere. He was a lame man from nothing. And he was just existing. Sitting there with no hope other than just existing there and then dying one day. He couldn't walk. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't go anywhere. He couldn't get a better job. He couldn't better himself. He had no hope. He had no chance. He was nothing. Has anybody here ever looked at yourself and thought sort of the same thing? Some hands went up. Yeah. You know, the truth is when we're compared to something good or something righteous, something like Jesus, and we look at ourselves compared to Him, this is us. We have no hope in and of ourselves. We can't make this thing better. I can't just stroll up to the king and say, you know what, I've got something to offer. It's this, 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 and this. No. We are lame and incapable people from nowhere with no hope of doing anything in and of ourselves, in need of something great, in need of rescue, and we can't bring it about ourselves because we're lame and we're from nowhere. Unless the king comes calling. So King David had him brought from Lodabar. Now can you imagine if you're him? I mean, you know you're basically worthless in society. There's nothing you can offer, and you know you're related to the worst dude in the whole country at that point in time. It'd almost be like in 4 or 8 years being related to Trump, or being related to Obama now, or whatever. Only 1,000 times worse because, or let's say after Stalin died, and then you're one of Stalin's kids. That's not good. That's not a good thing. You're in a bad situation, and I'm not comparing Trump or Obama to Stalin. I know it was bad. I don't mean to go there. I'm trying to even the playing field here. It wasn't good, and now he gets called to the king. A dead dog meets the king. A dead dog beats the king. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. I'm sure he thought he was done. Right? I mean, everybody else was dead from his family. He's the only one left. He's the only semi-threat, only he's lame, but still, maybe David sees him as some kind of threat. He calls him. I'm sure it was nervous. I'm sure it was a sleepless night or three. And here he comes, and he bows down and pays him honor. And David says, Mephibosheth, with an exclamation point. So that's good. Mephibosheth! And he says the same thing Ziba did, at your service. Whatever you want, he replied. David says this, the king, the one who can control everything, the judge and the jury, says this to the only living relative of his greatest enemy. The king says this, don't be afraid. David said to him, don't be afraid, Mephibosheth, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table. That's grace. Saul went to the only relative of his enemy. David went to the only relative of his greatest enemy, who had nothing to offer. His kingdom could gain nothing from him. And because of the grace that was shown to him, wanted to extend that grace and that kindness out further. And he gives him back everything that belonged to his grandfather Saul. And gave him a seat at the table. The king's table. None of David's servants had that seat. None of David's household that weren't related to him had that seat. He was bringing him in as a relative of himself. He was bringing him in as one of his own. And saying, not only am I going to give you back all this, but you're going to sit at my table. Now, does that sound familiar to what Jesus did for me and what Jesus did for you and what Jesus is willing to do for you if you don't know him and you're looking at yourself today saying, I've got nothing to offer. I'm a horrible person. I've done this, and this. I've done this. Perfect. Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. We were all lame. We were all useless. We were all from nowhere. We all had no hope until King Jesus came down to us. He descended to where we were, and he came and he lived a perfect life and showed us himself through this book and went to the cross to die for me and you and took our place on the cross and shed his blood so that you and I could not only have heaven and have some riches, but we could have a personal relationship with God Almighty and have a permanent seat at the table. We're his. He didn't just make us better and make us eternally rich and do all that. He made us one of his sons and daughters. We are joint heirs with Jesus Christ. We are part of the King's family. We can't offer anything to make him better. We can't bring anything to the table that's making God go, oh, I'm glad he's on my side. We can't do anything like that. But he, just because of who he is and the fact that God is love, he came down and created us and loved us and brought us into the very throne room, into the very feasting room, and gave us a seat at the table for eternity. We are his and his forever. Amen? So he brings him in, he has a seat at the table. Mephibosheth bowed down and said, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? I love the fact that he saw himself that way. And the truth is, this is where we need to see ourselves in this story. Not that we're worthless to everything, we need to feel sorry for ourselves or anything like that. But when compared to the glory of who God is, and we're like Isaiah when we realize that and we say, I can't. You're too much. But the king says, you know what? I'm making you exactly what you need to be. So that not only will you fit in, but you're going to fit in at my table, and we're going to sit together, and we're going to commune together, and we are going to be family. That is grace. Are we dead dogs? Are we worthless? Can we bring anything to the table? Are we from nowhere? Have you seen Earth compared to the rest of space? It's pretty small. You guys remember, what was the guy's name that used to do the Cosmos? Carl Sagan, right?
Yeah.
Told you I was smart. Man, just... All right, parentheses and Carl Sagan. We're going places here. Now, here's the thing about Carl Sagan. Remember when they brought that first photograph back from one of the telescopes, Hubble maybe, I don't know, one of them, Voyager maybe. Voyager? I don't know. I'm shooting for it here. But they sent up, and there was a sunbeam through the middle of the picture. And in the middle of that sunbeam was a little pale blue dot, and that was Earth. And Carl Sagan said, we are nothing but a pale blue dot in the middle of a sunbeam. His point was, how dare we think we're somebody because of that? And I kind of agree in a sense. But here's the thing. On that little pale blue dot in the middle of the sunbeam is where God decided to showcase His love to a group of people that He created, and He sent His only Son to that pale blue dot in the middle of that sunlight. Are we from nowhere? Yeah. Yeah, we're from nowhere. But we're somebody, not because of what we've been able to do, but because of what Jesus did for us. Mephibosheth wasn't somebody because of what he was able to do and what he was able to accomplish. Mephibosheth was somebody because the king chose to love him and make him part of his family. Just like our king decided to make us part of his family. Mephibosheth bowed down and said, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops so that your master's grandson may be provided for. Ha! That's pretty good. You go from Lodabar, you go from the middle of nowhere to all of a sudden you're at the king's table. And not only you're at the king's table, you got a group of people that are making sure you're provided for. Every need you have is provided for. That's a good gig, I'm guessing. Here's the thing. That's the same gig we have. And you're right where you're at. And your circumstances may seem hard. Your circumstances may seem difficult. Where you're at may not seem like the best thing, but I promise you, your king is providing for your every need right where you're at because he loves you and he's taking care of you. And you're his. You're part of his family. Provided everything for him. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. That's grace. That's grace. And that's us. We had no hope. We had no way. There's nothing we could bring to the table. But Jesus, the King of the universe, loved us, came down, gave His all so that we could be a part of His family. That's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. We're going to be there forever and ever and ever. We've had that grace shown to us. Now what? That's part 2. You got to come back in 2 weeks to find that out. Because I'm going to be hanging out with Mickey next week. Alright? And pray for me that I don't buy one of the rabbit ears things. They're like $30. You feel like when you're in Disney, you think it's a good idea, but it's never a good idea. Right? You know what I mean? So anyway, pray that I stay strong. But next week you're going to be in the outdoor service. Mark's going to be handling that. And then the next week we're going to talk about our response to that grace that's been shown to us. And we're going to see it in Mephibosheth's life. We're going to see it in Mephibosheth's life. What's it look like when we realize the kind of grace that's been extended to us? What's our response to that grace? Dearly Father God, I just ask you to be with us today, and God, help us to realize just how gracious you are to us. God, that we were nobodies from nowhere with no hope until you came in and you changed everything. You transformed us into children of God, into you joint heirs with Jesus, so that what all is yours is ours. We are a part of the kingdom forever, and we will sit at your table forever. We will be in your presence. And we will never know on earth. We get glimpses and we get glances of what it is to be loved by you, and we understand that. But to be physically in your presence and to be right there, God, for eternity is going to blow our minds. Thank you for that. Now, God, just help us to allow ourselves to see that grace that you've given us. That, yeah, we're dead dogs. Yeah, we're plain people. But we've got a seat at the table because we're loved by you, and that's all that matters. God, just help us to let that grace soak into our hearts and seep out into our relationships. And we'll just give you the praise. In Jesus' name.